Germany has announced it will send around 14 Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. The announcement comes after President Zelensky said on Tuesday that Kyiv needed allies to decide on whether they would deliver modern tanks to strengthen the country's defence against Russia. It seems they've answered his call, as the US media are reporting that the USA will also send dozens of its M1 Abrams battle tanks to Ukraine. Spain, Poland, Finland and Norway are also expected to contribute from their supplies of Leopard tanks. The Kremlin has downplayed the impact that Western tanks will have in repelling its forces in Ukraine, saying that the military aid to Ukraine would burn like all the rest. So what is a Leopard 2, and how effective will it be against the Russians?
Leopard 2 tanks are one of the 3 or 4 premier battle tanks in the world, which are the American Abrams M1, the Challenger 2, the French Leclerc tank, and then the Leopard. And the point about the Leopard 2s, which is so important, is that there are a lot of them in Europe. There are about 2,000 of them in various stores around European allies. About 15 different European countries, apart from Germany, have them. And the point about their power is that they're fast, they're very, very accurate, and they're better, as it were, unit for unit than anything that the Russians have got. But having said that, it's also the case that they've got to be used properly. We're not just talking about tanks on their own, but tanks working with armored personnel carriers, armored fighting vehicles, artillery, and aircraft. So Leopards can be the center of really powerful armored brigades, which would cut through pretty well anything that the Russians have got. That's the importance of them. The Kremlin can say what they like. They know that these tanks are the premier tanks in the world. They have very good armor, and their armor is the reactive armor, which can will take a tank hit from another tank by and large, and will still survive it. These tanks will take some stopping, and the Kremlin knows it, whatever they say to the contrary. 2 big issues arise, I think, from the equation at the moment. One is the numbers, and 2 is how long it will take. The Ukrainians say they need 300 main battle tanks. So something between 1 and 200 would actually make a significant difference. It's got to be at least 100 to begin to put together an armored brigade. The other factor is how long it will take, because it isn't just training on the tanks themselves. I mean, Ukrainians are very good at picking things up, and the existing tank crews would be able to move on to Leopard tanks fairly quickly. But it's not just that, it's training for the combined arms that would be required. So putting together a brigade, working with tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and so on, the Ukrainians have done a little bit of this, but not a lot of it. And that sort of training is very difficult to work out in just a few weeks. The decision that's been made on tanks is better late than never, but it is very late, I promise you. The T-14, the Armata tank, is just a propaganda issue at the moment. There is no indication that the T-14s are operationally ready. It's been a program that goes back well over 10 years, well back into the, well before 2010, actually. And it's been on and off and on and off, and it's been halted several times with troubles. It's been virtually cancelled once. The last order that the Russian Ministry of Defense placed for the T-14 Armata was about 100 tanks, and they were mainly for experimental purposes, just to get used to the way in which they would work. It's very unlikely that the Russians could submit onto the battlefield more than a couple of squadrons, of maybe 10, between 10 and 20. And there is a lot of information, a lot of intelligence that indicates that Russian forces don't particularly want them because they're not reliable. They have all sorts of problems. So I think if the Armata appears on the battlefield, we'll all be very interested in how it does from a technical point of view, but there is nothing about it, either its technology or the numbers the Russians have of T-14s, that imply that it could actually make any difference. Apart from the tanks and using the tanks as the spearhead of an all-arms, combined arms approach, the thing that the Ukrainians most need is air defense, because one of the things that has most dominated this war in the first year is the fact that the Russians do not have air superiority. If they did, almost everything the Ukrainians have achieved would have been impossible. And so this lack of air superiority is critical. And the ability of the Ukrainians to actually dominate parts of the airspace themselves has been quite remarkable. The Russians undoubtedly in the spring will come back with a massive air attack. And for that, the Ukrainians really need desperately, as badly as they need the tanks, they need air defense in order to keep their skies at least contested, if not clear of Russian aircraft.